This is GUI. I am going to try to show off a quick little demo of what I've hooked up today, which is essentially a bidirectional binding. Since many people haven't even heard of GUI, this is a newly in development graphical user interface library for Rust. It is very early in development, so bear with me. There's a lot of bugs in here. I'm going to try to avoid most of them, but I want to show off some cool stuff. So what is a bidirectional binding? Well, if we take this text field over here, currently says 240 in it, and as we change this, it gets updated. And if I go in here and change this to, it just starts working. And there is some validation in here. And another fun thing is just to show off that like auto layout kind of works there. That's kind of a cool little side effect. And then I can just overwrite the value again and it just starts working. So I was building this tool just to bootstrap kind of testing my own framework, which this is a bunch of rows and columns. This isn't actually a grid view, and there's a bunch of expands, and just trying to like make that all work as how it's supposed to, which is kind of by Flutter's definition of how it's supposed to. I ended up with a pretty cool little framework here. So I have scroll bars even that fade in and fade out based on whether or not you're idle or not. So I've got a little bit of animation system going on. So anyways, let's get back into just the part that I said that I was going to demo rather than, oh, one last thing. I have tab order too, which a lot of other frameworks don't have it yet. So anyways, how does this work? So I realized that to make this binding, I wanted to kind of make a helper because I have two separate controls in each one of these editing widgets. I'm trying to like make this be a like, I honestly don't know if I've designed a good system because I'm still building things with it. So this is the most complicated thing I've built with it yet. And so I'm trying to see how composition works. So each of these colors are being edited by this function here. And so I have this helper function create paired string. So even though I keep calling it float, and both of these are kind of floats. One of them is technically a float that's limited to the range of 0 to 1, and it's in the type system. But really, the important part is that we have toString, and we have fromster, and we have partial EQ. With those three things, we're able to make a bidirectional binding in GUI. So we start with the initial value going into dynamic. And dynamic is really just a fancy mutex that has some extra stuff on it that lets us attach like callbacks to get, well, you'll see. So we have our initial floating point value, whatever it is. And we're going to call map each unique, which basically is going to say for every time that this gets a new value and it actually passes a partial EQ check, we're going to call this function. And that function is going to return a value. In this case, it's a string. And what's it going to do with it? Well, it's going to actually store it in a dynamic as well. And so we end up getting a dynamic back. And so what this means is that every time we call get out of this text, or however we want to access the value, if float has changed in the meantime, it'll magically already have the new value. Now, obviously, there's mutexes, and so there's going to be, there is an order to how things work. But that's one direction binding. So how do we go for the other? So we do text for each, because this time we're not going to produce a value to create a new dynamic. You could if you want. You can keep doing map each as many times as you want. But in this case, we are trying to just go back and forth. So we're just going to do for each here. I have a little helper that just kind of makes it so you don't have to do the, let float equals float.clone trick to get around the fact that I got to move that thing in here and I want to use it later too. So I need a clone. And anyways, this is just a little helper that my framework has built in as well, just to kind of make things easy. Ultimately, for each takes a closure that takes a reference to a string. And so inside of it, we can say float try update. So this is the part that I added today, which specifically is checks for a deadlock essentially, and make sure that if there is a deadlock, we return the value instead of trying to store it, which obviously would fail because of the deadlock. So we can essentially short circuit the issue of where when the float gets updated and then it starts calling this callback, which then produces a new value into this, which then starts calling this callback, which then tries to start calling the other callback. This is the breaking of the chain right there. And so that allows us to make this binding safely without having to have an infinite loop essentially. So anyways, this is progress of how GUI has been going. I am nearly 5 minutes, so I guess this is going on YouTube. Hi YouTube.